time only. I'm spending so much of time explaining these things because the historiographical schools, though they have tried to understand the human history, human endeavors in different fields, in their write-ups, essentially are connected to these developments in history. Without understanding these developments, you cannot understand the historiographical schools. So therefore, there is a deep connection between how historiography developed and how these revolutions happened during this time. Now, history as a discipline branched out somewhere during the 4th century BCE, before Common Era. Herodotus, the person, the Greek thinker, he tried to distinguish history from storytelling. For many civilizations, for many societies, history was storytelling. Herodotus thought that's not the way to tell history. Telling history is a conscious exercise. Telling history has to have certain methodology. Now, what was the methodology? Methodology is a serious encounter with the empiricism, is the basis for constructing history. So therefore, during the 4th century BC onwards, we find a new departure in the way how the human past has been understood. The human past has been constructed in the lens of the historian. So therefore, the 4th century BCE is a very important stage as far as the historiographical schools were concerned. From then onwards, history started gaining a different recognition, a different identity for itself, and it moved on. So that is the background we need to understand. And further, this influence was quite pervasive, not confined to only Europe, but also it had its influence over other civilizations too. So therefore, a new method of looking at the history based on empiricism slowly started emerging. Now, another stage, the geographical discoveries, started world to come together in one sense. It also expanded in another sense. Now, the geographical discoveries connected the different civilizations. Now, Europeans particularly, they moved out to different directions and they carried with them all those developments, epistemological developments, with them, when they reached out to these different destinations, obviously, these ways of thinking had their impact on the way they looked at the natives. They were trying to subjugate the people. In other words, wherever they went, they wanted to subjugate the people, the societies, the cultures. So this is a new process, started. So geographical discoveries, in that sense, brought in a new kind of a development in the human history, which is very important because it was not just a matter of just expanding their territories. The three important words, that epitomize the purpose of these, discoveries. One, God, gold, and glory. God, gold, and glory. So God, religious purpose. Then, gold, wealth, and glory, subjugating the ruled. So this is very significant for us to understand. So now I'll move on to these historiographical schools, because spending too much of time on this may be at the cost of historiography. Now, the British came here. I mean, Europeans came. Finally, I end with the British because they ended finally. At the beginning, their interest was only the commercial interest, the economic interest. Eventually, that interest got converted into imperial interest, expanding their territories. They tried to colonize not just the land, they tried to colonize both mind and body of the ruled. They tried to colonize both the mind and body of the ruled. What do we mean by that? We were made to accept their superiority. We were made to accept their authority. So now, this stage is very significant as far as the Indian history is concerned. When they came here with these purposes, yes, they had a very limited purpose, but eventually it expanded itself. When that interest got expanded, they had to discover, in quotes, new tools to subjugate the ruled. They had to find out new tools to subjugate the ruled. What do we mean by the tools? Tools means, bringing out new methods of controlling the Indians. One of the ways of controlling the Indians was the knowledge system, proving that the European knowledge was superior to Indian knowledge, proving that the Indians were backward and they were forward. So this sense of projecting themselves as superior dominated their thinking, and which was a very, very predominant feature in their knowledge production. We call this as knowledge production. How did it begin? This all began with their search for the history of India. They were quite familiar with their history. Their history means it was recorded. Someone had recorded, and they had lots of these works to refer to, and they could understand, yes, this is our history. They carried the same sense of the history that somebody would have written the history of India, and they started searching for these histories. They couldn't find any history here. They were puzzled. What is this? These people don't have history at all. Because there had to be someone to have recorded history. But I'm searching, I'm not getting it. We are searching, we are not getting it. That means what? They don't have history at all. So they started with the basic premise that Indians lacked the sense of history. They went to the extent of saying that Indians do not have history. They started searching. That search began with the decoding of Sanskrit texts. Decoding of the Sanskrit texts. And these early school, they have been called as the Orientalists. Generally in the textbooks, whenever there is a reference to Orientalists, it is confined to the early Orientalists, who were interested in bringing out the glory of the Indian past. Yes, they were trying to bring out the glory of the Indian past. But that school alone is not the representation of the Oriental thought. After them, in the sense, there were different shades of Orientalism. Let me put it this way. The early school was one shade. They tried to bring out the glory of the hoary past of India. Followed by the other school. They were the imperialist, school. They critiqued this school, the earlier school. What these people are telling or saying that the India did have a glory. India did have a wonderful history. India did produce a wonderful knowledge. They said no, nothing worthwhile India was able to produce. Nothing India was able to produce worthwhile. And there were other shades also, like the Anglicists. the people who were the advocates of the British elements in every branch of the British administration. Anglicists, and there were missionaries. And missionaries particularly, they engaged themselves with decoding the social practices of the Hindu society. They brought up a huge literature on sati practice, the caste system, polygamy. There are a number of practices that the Indians were part with, and the missionaries, they produced a huge corpus of literature on these various social customs of the Hindu society. So therefore, when we talk of Orientalism, let us not just confine to one early school of the Orientalism. Oriental means it is the Eastern society. For them, we are the Eastern. Orientalism just does not confine to only India. It includes China, it includes Arabia, it includes the Middle Eastern countries too. For them, this entire area constitutes the Orientalist geography. So therefore, in the Indian context, Orientalism did produce 4 different shades of schools. One, the early Orientalists who eulogized India, followed by the Utilitarians like J.S. Mill. I'll come to that a little later. They looked at the Indian past as worthless, followed by the Anglicists and the missionaries. So all of them painted only the negative pictures other than the early Orientalists. So what did the early Orientalists do? The early Orientalists, it all began with the works of William Jones. William Jones, he tried to understand the Indian past. And while understanding the Indian past, they engaged mainly with 2 aspects or 2 things. One, the common language, the Indo-European languages family. And number 2, Indo-European family. See, racial connectivity is one part, language connectivity is another part. So therefore, William Jones, he, by engaging himself with the study of the Vedas and other corpus of Sanskrit literature, was able to generate this new construct called, it is Indo-European language family and Indo-European racial family. Particularly the North Indian kinship was linked to the Persian blood. So that way he was trying to build a new narrative for the Indians. So the early part of Orientalists, be it William Jones or Colebrooke, these people, the biggest contribution that they have made is unearthing a huge corpus of material. We did not know that we had so much of material to prove that we had a history. But now, thanks to their efforts, we know that we had so much to showcase, that we have so much to show that we too did have history. So the major contribution of these people was unearthing a huge corpus of the material, the archaeological material and the literary material. So that is the biggest contribution of these people. But as far as the narrative was concerned, the narrative was glorifying the Indian past. But while glorifying also, they had a final say to say. What is that final say? That yes, you did have a glory in the past, but what are you now? What are you now? Now you don't have anything to boast. You have only the past to boast, for yourself. So therefore, they were trying to justify the British imperial hegemony over India. That yes, you produce this knowledge. Now you are totally, in terms of epistemological, enterprise, you are almost zero. You're not doing anything worthwhile. So therefore, even while glorifying the Indian past, they were also trying to justify that their rule was necessary for India, called the white man's theory. But the utilitarians, James Mill, who wrote the History of British India, published in 1818, he debunked all these claims of the early Orientalists. He said, nothing worthwhile India did produce even in the past. He divided history into three groups: the ancient or the Hindu India, the Mohammedan India, and now the Christian India, the British India. So he brought in the religious, orientation, in the way the history has been looked at. Even to this day, somehow we have been deeply influenced, and somehow without even really thinking consciously that we have stuck with this ideology. We are carrying that ideology. There are schools which have debunked this, but in our research activities, if we generally observe how things are happening in the universities, I still believe that we are carried away by this concept of Hindu India, Mohammedan India, and the British India or the Christian India. Now, why did he do this division? What was the purpose? The purpose was to say Hindu India and the Muslim India were India did not produce anything worthwhile. They caused only misery to the people. The social inequality increased, and those periods caused the decadence of the Indian society. They did not allow things to progress, because these people, the utilitarians, they always think only in terms of the progress, the human happiness. Their basic philosophy was, their claim was the maximum happiness of the maximum people, what they claimed. But was it there in the medieval or early period? It was not there. That is the way how the utilitarian historians, they try to bring a new narrative to the Indian history. So therefore, one part of the historians, the Orientalists, be it Jones or Colebrook or Max Muller, they all try to bring in a huge corpus of the literature, whereby they said they eulogized the Indian past. But the utilitarian historiography did not appreciate this sense of eulogization, and they brought in a counter narrative to that, which is very significant for us to understand. So looking at the past, how two schools, they differ. So therefore, history essentially is a construct. You understand? I don't know whether I've been able to communicate to you what I wanted to communicate. What I'm saying is that history essentially is a construct. One school of thought, it looked at history in that fashion. The other school, they debunked, and they yet proved that there is another way of looking at history, totally debunking the claims of the previous school. So in the utilitarian school, you can also include the Anglicists and the missionaries. So their main aim was to legitimize their power in India, be it the early Orientalists or the utilitarian or the imperial historians. Their only claim was that they were legitimizing the British control over India. So this is a significant thing that we need to understand. Further, in the utilitarian school, other than Mill, you have a great number of people like Charles Grant, then Vincent Smith, Henry Eliot, Elphinstone, Munro, H.H. William. There are so many people. All their write-ups, ultimately, they conclude one thing, that the Indians need us. Indians, did not have anything worthwhile to show. So this is their ultimate, conclusion. So all this was carried out, through different institutional enterprises. The early Orientalists, they brought in the Calcutta Madrasa, and then Asiatic Society of Bengal, Sanskrit School of Banaras. These were the institutions through which they were trying to produce this huge corpus of literature. Then, another school was the nationalist school. When the Orientalists, be it the early Orientalists or the utilitarian Orientalists or the Anglicists or missionaries, when they were negating the Indian past, the first generation of the Indians who are now the products of the Western institutions did not take it lightly. They wanted to contest it because the national identity was a basic issue for them. So now the nationalist school or the historiography will have to be understood in the context of our freedom movement, the anti-colonial movement. So during the anti-colonial movement, there was a need for us to prove that we did have history. We did have golden periods in history in India. It was only to augment the nationalist movement. So, with a view to augment the nationalist sentiments in the people, the nationalist school, hugely engaged with bringing out volumes and volumes of, books, pamphlets, write-ups, giving a different orientation to the Indian past. What was that orientation? India did produce great knowledge. India did, possess the sense of the past. The basic problem with the Orientalists was they were looking for the empirical data, empiricism. Now, we did have our sense of history in our legends, in our stories, in the way the communities built their own, community stories. In those memories, we have history. But it is a challenge for the person who engages himself with these stories to bring out the sense of history, how that was prevalent in the minds of the Indians. Or in other words, now for example, Ramayana, Mahabharata. Per se, we can't say that, we can never say that they are history texts. But there is history in that. Any writing, if anyone knows the purpose of writing, is only reacting to certain situations. Your reaction to certain situations comes out in certain forms that becomes part of history. Now, the large number of stories being circulated in the communities, and they had their own number of stories to tell, and these stories over a period of time gained a different level of strength, and that strength got transformed or translated into producing these important classics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. So if you prima facie, if you ask, are they history textbooks? They are not. History texts, they are not. But then there is history in it. If we look at the the discourse in Mahabharata, the discourse between Yudhishthira and Bhishma Pitama, Shanti Parvan, part of that. It's a wonderful reflection of polity. It's a wonderful reflection on the polity. Now, what are the qualities of the king? How a person becomes the king? There is a process for that. There is a coronation ceremony. And what are the duties of the ministers? How ministers are to be appointed? How one needs to collect the taxes? Look at the imagination of those periods. In Mahabharata itself, he says, a king has to collect the taxes without hurting the sentiments of the ruled or the subjects. It's like the calf sucking the milk from its mother. When the calf sucks the milk from mother doesn't feel that it's a pain. It's a pleasure for mother. So similarly, a king, when he wants to collect the taxes, he should not burden the people. Look at this level of thinking of those times. Can you imagine that? Unfortunately, we are in a different stage now in history. Now taxes are are everything. They decide everything for us. It's a different topic for discussion. The entire Shanti Parvan is a discourse on the polity. So therefore, there is history in that. Discerning that history is a challenge for the historian. In the nationalist historiography, such things, such thoughts became very prominent, and they produced some of the best classics. Like, who are the people who produced some of these classics as part of the nationalist school? One, for example, A. Saltaker, State and Government in Ancient India. Jaiswal, Hindu Polity. If you look at these classic, or even Ghoshal, who produced a huge volume on the political ideas up to medieval period. There are a number of texts which have tried to depict Indian past in the way of achievements, in the terms of accomplishments. So this sense of accomplishment is too deeply rooted in the nationalist historiography. Of course, it was all started during the end of the 19th century when Bankim Chandra, he was trying to build an identity for the Hindu Rashtra. Anandamata, for example, where you have this poem Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram, the entire Anandamata is the reflection of the Sannyasi rebellion. Sannyasi rebellion. A historical event becoming a subject matter for a creative work. And this in a way initiated a huge thinking to construct a different kinds of texts. And this was subsequently followed by the many of these historians who produced very important works. Now, V.D. Savarkar, Hindutva, who is a Hindu, or eulogizing 1857 as the first war of Indian independence. These were the answers to the British challenges. In a way, wanted to challenge the British in the Indian terms. So that way, nationalist historiography is a very important intervention in countering the European historiography or the imperialist historiography under various names. Then I'll come to the Marxist historiography. That's another very important school. And Karl Marx himself, he tried to understand history in certain phases, how it evolved over a period of time. Basically, it's a materialistic interpretation of, it's a very huge discourse, very, very huge discourse. We don't have time for, this discourse. But you need to understand what Marx says about history. Unless you understand what Marx says about history, a theoretical construct of history, you will not be able to, understand what he said about India. He also said India was a decade system. India, he said that it is a static system which produced, what's that? He uses a particular term. Despot. It produced despots. It produced despots. So he tries to understand, he tries to theorize history in such a fashion, and he tries to fix in Indian history in that particular framework. And taking a cue from this theoretical construct, there were many Indian Indians who tried to give a written form to that theoretical construct. M.N. Roy is an important, thinker. Dange, an important thinker. Then very foundational kind of works, myth and reality, or Kosambi, D.D. Kosambi is a very foundational, historian. His three important works, I have all the list. I don't have time to, read out all those texts, but the writings of these people gave a new orientation to the Indian history, which is basically a materialistic, interpretation of history. And there they try to, bring in the Marxist philosophy in understanding these things. For example, I'll tell you. R.P. Dutt, he traces three stages of the evolution of the capitalism. One, the early stage was the merchant capitalism, followed by the industrial capitalism. And now the third stage is the financial capitalism. So the merchant capitalism, the industrial capitalism, and now the financial capitalism, how they have changed the very nature of the Indian, the societies in particular. So each stage is marked by certain, characteristic features, and these features are very important for us to be recognizing. So therefore, the works of R.P. Dutt is very important, and similarly, D.D. Kosambi work is also very important, and M.N. Roy, as I said, is also equally important. And R.S. Sharma, another important historian who has reflected on the Indian feudalism and the Shudras in ancient India. That's another important work. And R.S. Sharma is a very significant name as far as the Marxist historiographical school is concerned. He brings in the differentiation between the European model of feudalism and the Indian model of feudalism. There is a subtle difference. Each one is a very huge subject. On each subject, one could talk for hours. So that is the kind of subjects. And next, I'll come to the subaltern, historiography. The subaltern historiography is a very powerful intervention into the construct of Indian history. Subaltern historiography, it gained its currency with the language developed by Gramsci, an Italian thinker, and prison notes of him is a very important for you to understand what this subalternism is all about. Subaltern by per se was it's a middle rank given to a soldier in the European sense. But then why he used that word, there is a huge background for that. Mussolini was trying to establish a fascist government over there. Against that background, many of the voices that were subdued, suppressed, they were trying to come out with new voices. So the Gramscian term was picked up by Ranjit Guha during 1980. And in 1982, he brought in the first volume of subaltern studies. There are about 12, books on subaltern studies, the series of 12 books. And there are a number of subaltern historians, Dipesh Chakravarti, for example, M.S.S. Pandian, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, and there are a number of, historians. Each one of them have tried to address the history. Now, what is important and significant in the subaltern historiography? The subaltern historiography or the historians, they contested the very, ways of looking at history by the other schools of historiography. It was always the elite formed a basis for the other schools of, historians to construct history. So it was always elitism based. But these people, they contested that. They understood the whole thing in the context of the problems faced by the lower strata of the society. They tried to now address the issues of the tribes, the issues of women, the issues of the lower caste. Okay, a new social movements were started. How these new social movements, even during the freedom struggle, not only contested the the imperialist hegemony, but they also contested the hegemony of the native feudal elements, native elite. So therefore, there was a huge gap in the way historiography was built by earlier schools. This school was trying to locate the place of, or situate the place of these new, the subaltern groups, namely the women or the Dalits or Adivasis or the tribes, all these various groups, and they were trying to address the issues of these people and trying to bring them into the mainstream historiography. So these classes were left out in the realm of historiography, and now these subaltern historians, they were trying to bring them back to the mainstream historiography, contesting the very nature of the mainstream historiography. So that way, it's a very, very significant school, and it has faded over the entire area of historiography. Now, one of the important offshoots of these developments, particularly the Marxian and the subaltern schools, were the development of the regional histories. Regional histories was not something that was conceived in the earlier stage in the historiographical schools. It was a Marxist school, and later particularly the subaltern school, which paved the way for the emergence of the regional histories. Now, every region has its own history. It is both particular and also connected to the general. So, in Marxian terminology, there is a particular and there is a general, and how this particular remains a particular and also gets connected to the general. So, this particular and general, there are two important components in history. So, we are here as communities. Yes, we belong to different kinds of community. Now, you are all students as a community. But if you get back into a social fold, again, you become the part of other social groups. So that way, the subalterns, they were now trying to address the issue of these various subalterns. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, Can the Subaltern Speak? Is one of the acclaimed essays of Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, which is a reflection on the Sati system. It's a reflection on the Sati system. She says, if the real subaltern, can he speak? She says that one who claims, one who asserts to whichever the class one belongs to, maybe the women or the Dalit or Adivasi, whichever the class that one belongs to, if one is able to assert, is not a subaltern. That assertion is very important. The people who have not been able to assert themselves, or the classes which have not been able to assert themselves, they are the subaltern classes. So this is a very significant intervention as far as the ways of looking at history. So therefore, I would end saying that the past is the issue for all historians, but how the past has been dealt by the different schools is the issue. So Orientalists, with all their manifestations, different orientations, they looked at history of India in one particular way or a couple of particular ways. And Marxists, they looked at history of India from a different perspective altogether. The nationalists, we had an urgency to prove that we had our own deep history. That was another motivating factor. For the subalterns, it was their association with the various schools of thoughts of those times. They were associated with the Maoist insurgencies. Ranjit Guha himself was associated with the Maoist insurgents, the fight. So therefore, he was deeply influenced by that philosophy. Or Gramsci himself was part of the anti-fascist movement in Italy. So these personal experiences, personal associations of these people made them to stand where they stand historiographically. in terms of their historiographical accomplishments. So therefore, it is important for us to recognize that though we, as far as history is concerned, there should be one common, history. Why there are different schools? Because different schools are there because ways of looking at the past based on their own methodology. Each school has its own, method of looking at the back. It's like, all of us are here to give you one simple example. I mean, my talk is only for, students. To give you a simple example, that why is that, each one of us are understood by our own friends, our own family, and our own other people in different fashions. None of us would carry one opinion, by the people who are around us. Each one of us, we have different stories to be told by the different people, maybe our friends, maybe our family members, maybe the distant one. Why is that? Why don't we carry only one single story for us? Do we have a single story? No, we don't have a single story. My mother has a way of looking at me, and she has certain characterization of me. My certain, distant relative has a way of looking at me, and they have certain conclusions. And my friends have a way of looking at me, and they have certain conclusions. All varied. So therefore, essentially, it is how you look at the things, on what basis you look at things, and how scientifically you engage and critically engage with your material makes you a good historian. If you are just accepting what is there in the material or the sources, and if you are just trying to explain everything in your own words, you are not a historian. A very, very important quality for a good student of history, a historian, is that one should be able to critically and seriously engage with the material. If one is not able to engage with the material on critical terms, then one cannot become a good historian, a good student of history. So therefore, there are versions. There are versions, because we are dealing with something which we have not seen, which we have not heard. And I would suggest every student to read What is History by E.H. Carr. It is a 1961 publication, small book. I would request you to read that book, What is History by E.H. Carr, 1961 version. He brings in all these elements there. He writes that, we are reading something which we have not seen. We are trying to reconstruct on something which we have not heard, we have not seen, we have not felt. I mean, totally disconnected from that. So therefore, your students of law. So even when you are dealing with your cases, the cases which you have not seen, you are dealing with the cases which you have not seen. You look at that history. I mean, the case based on whatever the document that they give you, right? It is through the documents you enter into that case. It's through the documents you enter into a certain story. Similarly, a history student also, through the documents, we would enter into a certain aspects. I think that sense of critical engagement with whatever the documents that been given to you is very important for a student of law, and equally important for the student of history. I end here. We can, if there are any questions, I can take up. I thank the management of the institution and the faculty for having given me this wonderful opportunity to be here with you. To what extent I've been able to resolve, I don't know, but I thank you all for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening speech. We will now have a discussion and interaction session with the speaker. I'd now like to call upon Ms. Ahwatha from 1BA LLB onto the dais to begin with the session.
You have to come there.
Okay. Yeah.
Adi, ಅದು ರೆಡಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರ ಬಂತು.
Sir, I'm Ahwatha from first year BA studying history as well as a subject, and I really am so pleased to welcome you on behalf of KLELA College. But I listened to the information which was given, and most of them were facts. So I'm really interested about your perspective of each and every school of thought which you have explained till now, because I felt that it was more or less neutral about you put forth the ideologies as they were, but I'm really interested in your analysis, your perspective of looking at each school of thought. And one more thing was that I'm really curious about the practical aspects, like how we can apply whatever we learned today, like whatever you told us about the schools of different historians and the thoughts and ideologies, how we can apply them in our practical life. So I really wish to ask you about how the knowledge of historiography is applicable in our present life, and how it enables us to understand each and every historian's perspective.
Thank you. That's a wonderful intervention. We as a human society are evolving. That's number one. This society, in the process of this evolution, has tried to understand itself. And this process of understanding itself has been done by various segments. One of the segments is the class of historians. When we use the word historians, it's not a homogeneous group. Basically, historians are a heterogeneous group who belong to different schools of thought, who are influenced by certain ideological movements. Now, why there are different schools of thought? Each school has certain motivations. I told you the talk also, probably, if I'm not correct, that when the Orientalists, they tried portraying India, they had a motivation. The motivation was to legitimize the colonial expansion here, legitimizing their stay here. Whether it's the early Orientalists or the other shades of Orientalists like the Utilitarians or the other schools which I mentioned. So therefore, each school have tried to understand history depending upon the kind of motivation that they had, depending upon the sources that they had on hand, depending upon the kind of training that they had to look at this history. At this juncture, now you are familiar with those schools, and now you are an evolved person. You would know the merits and demerits of each school of thought. And when you understand the strengths and weaknesses of each schools of thought, then you are the evolved person. Probably you try to understand the entire history in a very holistic sense. Though holistic sense itself is an utopia. Because we the human beings are most unpredictable. In the entire ecosystem, if there is only one species which laughs when it wants to weep, is the human being. All other animals, they are instinct oriented. If they feel like hitting at something, they would hit. That's it. But we, the human beings, we are too complex. So therefore, understanding a complex, a species like human beings by the human beings it's again a complex process. So therefore, there are different schools of thought, and the other schools of thought. I told you that the nationalists, they had a motivation, which I explained, and subaltern. They were seeing the missing links in the way history has been told. So therefore, they picked up from these missing links. They tried to bring an alternative to the earlier schools. They were too critical of the Cambridge school. They were too critical of many other schools. Why they were critical? But because the aspect that they were interested in were not addressed there in the earlier schools. Obviously, they wanted to fill in the gap. There is a new school now, so it would emerge. And now, in the recent past, it's not just recent, but 60s and onwards, you have a new school of thought called the postmodernists. Derrida, Foucault, White, so many of them. Now they have gone to the extent of believing that history is not able to tell the truth. And secondly, they would tell us all histories, particularly Foucault, he tells it that if you need to understand the nature of historical writing, you need to understand the power relations. Because all these narratives or the constructions are in the vicinity of the power structure, power relations. So now today, to make it little more clear, why there is so much a cry to push our history back to 12,000 years now. Because there is a particular government representative, they have a particular ideology to believe in, and that ideology, it believes that the greater the push to Indian history to the backdate, the greater the strength of the sense of identity you would be able to establish. Okay? So now, whatever the development that are happening now, you will have to understand in the context of these power relations and power structures. And similarly, Derrida, he would say that language is a very important tool of communication, but language is quite slippery. You go and see there means go, yes, quite understandable. See there means what to see. It all depends on one who listens, how one takes it. So therefore, the kind of language that is being used even to narrate history, there are slipperies. That's one part. And secondly, absolute truth is something, an illusion. There is experimental truth in science. But that experiment again is evolving. There is one point in time which defined an atom as indivisible unit. But later, Madam Curie, when she said that, later it was contested by another scientist called Rutherford. What did he say? Even atom is divisible. There are electrons, neutrons, protons. Is it not divisible? So that way, even science is growing. Don't ever think that science is grown and it's fully matured. No. Even to this day, we have not been able to decode our own body nature. And that is the status of the science which tries to run the world, the phenomena. And naturally, in social science, we have these limitations. It is not the limitations of the people, it is the limitations of our sense of understanding. Thank you.
And sir, how important is regional history in our day-to-day life?
Yeah. All histories in one sense or the other are regional histories. There was a time when history was looked at as the history of the humankind, the story of civilization. It's a grand narrative. Particularly, the European revolutions of the 18th century and earlier to that, they were trying to bring in all grand narratives. Then the postmodernists, they seriously contested, these grand narratives are the myths. You will have to look at history, in the local context. History lives in the local context. In the sense that all of us, we belong to certain social background. Okay? So ultimately, your history is the history of that whatever the local segment that you belong to. In certain sense, you belong to a particular community. In certain other sense, you belong to a gender. In certain other sense, you belong to a nation. In certain other sense, you belong to a language group. So each individual is, divided into these different zones. Depending upon the kind of zones that one looks at, the role of a person changes. Okay. So therefore, regional history is very, very important. Yes, we live in the regional history, but regional history is also linked to the other things that are happening outside the regional history. Okay. So regional history, what is important? The empiricism is the regional history. Yes, I may try to write the history of my village. That's the regional history. I may try to write the history of my language. Right, fine. But then the ways of looking at these things, are elsewhere connected. Those ways of looking at is not just confined to one particular region. The ways of looking at these things are also drawn from the other sources. So at the level of understanding these things, somewhere we go out of these bounds. But when it comes to unearthing the material, we become too regional because we confine to bring out the material which is confined to certain regions, certain zones.
Sir, and coming to utilitarianism, they claim you in your talk you told us that they claim that whichever conduct gives us happiness, it is right, and whichever doesn't, then it is wrong. Isn't that the ideology of utilitarianism?
Yes, that was the ideology.
Since happiness is a very subjective thing which differs in a huge class of society, if we take an example, the upper class people had happiness but they suppressed the lower class, and the lower class wouldn't have the happiness. So, would you really think that the utilitarian approach is one of the best ways to analyze history?
No, utilitarian approach and that particular expression that maximum happiness of the maximum number was a reflection to point out that the people were more happy during the British period compared to the earlier period. That was the reflection. Utilitarians, they were trying to attack the earlier phases, the Mohammedan phase and the Hindu phase. So the Hindu and Mohammedan phases for them were the periods of suppression. Okay, so there was no happiness. It was only under the British and their benevolence and the new kind of system that was introduced, the new kind of education that was introduced, would assure people to feel happy about it. So it was essentially, in one way, critiquing the earlier system, and in another way, justifying its own administration, legitimizing its own administration. That's the context.
And if we come to Marxism, sir, we have a lot of facts. We have, they generally talk about economy and the feudalism which existed. So, would you really feel that Marxism is the most practical way of analyzing history?
That's one way of analyzing history. It is not, it is also practical. It's not that, it's not practical. There is nothing like a perfect system of analyzing history. Each system has its own strengths and limitations. Marxism is one way of looking at history. That the materialistic, the production relations, it would determine things in history. Okay, so if you look at from only that point of view, yes, you can view the history, but that becomes one particular way of looking at history. Okay, so therefore every school is a way of looking at history. There is nothing like this is the total history. We have looked into all aspects of history through this school. Nothing like that. Every school has a way of looking at it. But very important, as I told in the lecture also, that when you try to bring out a new orientation to history understanding, the very important issue is how you have engaged yourself with the material on the basis of which you are trying to bring out this narrative. So your engagement with the material, your critical analysis of the material, that is very, very significant and too central to bring out a narrative.
Sir, and when it comes to Marxism, the opinions of many historians differ. Like if we consider D.D. Kosambi and R.S. Sharma, they talk about feudalism as a main topic. But when it comes to Romila Thapar, she doesn't really, her explanation of Marxism doesn't really revolve around feudalism. So what would be your way of interpreting Marxism?
She doesn't say that I'm a Marxist. But definitely they were influenced by the Marxists because she herself, records that for some these works are two milestones in understanding the Indian history. She was deeply influenced by some of these writers. Okay. So now she is basically confined to the ancient history of India. So while understanding the ancient history, it is not just a feudalism alone is a thing that you need to understand. There are many other aspects. For example, now she engages herself with the understanding the stories of the past, the old body traditions of the past. How do we understand these things? If you apply only the Marxist terminology to understand these things, then you may not be able to understand them the way they are meant to be understood. Okay, so in a way, she is there and she is outside. That's the way I have understood her.
Sir, and I have this question about subaltern approach. How relevant is it in the present day scenario? Do you really think that there are still people who are downtrodden even now? Before we could understand that there were caste systems and it was very rigid, but what about the situation now?
It is now very much in different forms. Now this is the age of algorithms. Algorithms are addressing people at different levels.
So, like, if we consider like 10 years down the lane, then today will be history. So, do you think that the subaltern approach would be relevant even 10 years down the lane?
History doesn't allow you to speak for the future. It allows only to understand the past. That's why, at the beginning I said, time present and time past are perhaps present and time future. Yes, the future is, the future becomes the future based on this past only. But this is the way it is going to become, this is the way it is going to be. It's not our plan. That's what it is.
And when it comes to nationalists, why did they, they wanted to glorify, like nationalists came during the colonial period, right? So they wanted to glorify India's past before the colonials and how India was happier before the colonials. So why did they actually receive criticism for elitism?
Elitism, that is the critique of the subaltern school. Okay, so they said the entire history has been addressed, having these elitist as a centrality. Elitism as a centrality in the discourse. But the nationalists, they definitely eulogized. There's no doubt about that. Eulogized the past, but there was a purpose for that. Each school, as I told you, was more, was motivated by certain, factors. And for the nationalists, it was the independence of India, gaining independence of India, and becoming a free country was the most, important factor. So naturally, they had to eulogize the past so that they would reach out to the masses. So reaching out to the masses was very important, and reaching out to the masses is possible only in their own idiom. In their own idiom. Almost in a way, it was similar to the position that held by early Orientalists. The early Orientalists, they said the natives are to be ruled in their own laws, which was seriously contested by the Utilitarians. And particularly, Macaulay's critics, you would understand it.
Thank you so much for the information, sir. It was really valuable.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
That was an informative interaction session. Thank you, sir, for addressing all the queries. So we have a question from the online also. So a girl called Sanjana has asked, sir, if the early Orientalists wanted to legitimize the British rule in India, what was the need for eulogizing India's past? What was the need for criticizing India's past?
can speak from here.
Yes, sir, sure.
Probably I touched that issue. They eulogized Indian past, yes. But they were also asking a question, what are you now? So eulogizing the past was for the reason to ask the Indians, what are you now? So therefore you need us to be ruling over you. Okay? So it was by way of eulogizing the past, they were also trying to legitimize their stay in India, saying that now you require. Days are over. Now you don't have anything to showcase. You are too decayed now. In fact, their very expression was decaying system, the Indian decaying system.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for addressing all our queries. We will now have a break for 10 minutes. The further session will be continued after 10 minutes. So I request all of you to resume back after 10 minutes. High tea is arranged. Kindly go take. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Guys, wait for
I have an announcement to make.
in 2007 and PhD from Karnataka University, Hampi in the year 2020. He has also done a special course in film appreciation and filmmaking through Film and Television Institution of India, Pune in the year 2015. He was awarded with a PhD from Karnataka University, Hampi for the topic of Ideology and the Cultural Questions of Kannada Film, a Historical Construction, a research fellowship by Indian Council of Historical Research, New Delhi, and had many such great experiences. He also proved that he is a great researcher by presenting 10 international level research papers and 40 national level research papers in seminars and conferences. Dr. Pradeep Kumar had also written script and screenplay for award-winning Kannada films like Reservation and Ginny, along with great books like Papilio Buddha, Ritvik Gathak, and many more. Introducing you has been a great honor, sir, and I extend a hearty welcome to you on behalf of Heritage Club, KLE Society Law College, and RCCH. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Arshita. I now request Dr. Pradeep Kenchanur, cinema critic and historian, to address the gathering and begin with the lecture, sir, please.
Namaste to all. Thanks for inviting me to deliver on nationalism, national movement, and Indian cinema. So these three, terms and terminology, I think definitely invokes Now, I think these three terminologies or terms, invokes a larger discourse or discussions among history academia and even among film studies academia of India. So far, for your information, we have a lot of film scholars who have done, enormous work on these topics. But again and again, repeatedly these things are asking asking the space for the larger debate again and again. I think scholars like Madhav Prasad, scholars like Ravi Vasudevan, and one of the very famous historian who is working in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, known as Kaushik Bhaumik, very seriously and serially they have addressed these kind of issues, which merges both history and I think nationalism and other issues in India. I think I have to start with some of the very serious engagement of these terms like nationalism and national movement and the idea of Indian cinema. As far as Indian nation and Indian nationalism is concerned and Indian nation is concerned, I think we have all our agree and endorsement with an idea that Indian nation and Indian nationalism is a kind of imagined community. We have a lot of regions, we have a lot of culture, we have a lot of language, dialects, and a variety of cultural practices across India. Although we stand for larger India, a nation, larger India as a nation, or even we can equate that particular idea, or empirical idea that has a political India. But it is not a homogeneous India. The India we represent, it's a inclusive India, it's a diverse India, and the idea of nation and nationalism itself is diverse and varied. That is my very fundamental argument and comment on this particular topic. Second thing, I want to make a very clear statement on national movement, the idea of national movement also a kind of, it's a kind of, very huge life river like Ganga with lot of tributaries and lot of streams and substreams. So it's not hegemonic again. And I think lot of, parties, lot of people, lot of communities, lot of identities and entities represents the whole idea of national movement. Again, it becomes, very interesting phenomena like nation. It's like very much diverse and very much variant. The third very important issue I want to, cite in front of you is the idea of Indian cinema. Again, lot of scholars who have already dealt with this particular topic. I think I can cite and very important scholar from America, that is Philip Lutgender. He coins a very interesting, phraseology, asking, is there an Indian way of cinema? He also, puts in another way, is there an Indian way of cinema? I think it is equally, prominent question, which is even before Philip Lutgender, asked by a very important Kannada literary figure and poet and very famous critic, A.K. Ramanujan. I think he has asked a very prominent culture, a very prominent, question, asking, is there an Indian way of thinking? So I think both questions, resembles and goes and, gives us an answer that there is no Indian way of cinema. There are Indian way of cinema. So I think every three things in this particular component, the idea of nation and idea of national movement and idea of a sense of Indian cinema represents a non-homogeneous, diverse, various entity and expressions, rather a limited, fragmented, kind of experience. That is my very important remark on this particular topic. Second thing, I want to jump into, my arguments. As far as Indian freedom movement is concerned, Indian cinema echoed Indian freedom movement very well. That is true in three models. First and foremost, the model in which in the contemporary Indian freedom movement, which was prevalent on 1930 and 1940, that can be extended up to 1950, that has been echoed directly or verbally, verbal echoing, that can be called. Okay, one. And second very important model in which Indian freedom movement has been mimicked through cinema, that is in the form of using lot of freedom movement idioms and even symbols, even some metaphors, I can say. Okay, and third very important idioms like again nation, nationalism, and other issues, coherent and non-coherent issues. And third very important model, which I want to cite here, that mimicked the contemporary reality, that has nationalism and national movement, that has in the form of having Gandhian ideals, Gandhian structural programs, especially the idea of untouchability, the idea of alcoholism, and that kind of ideas, Gandhian structural ideas, represented and mimicked in the narrative, larger narrative and treatment and visualization of contemporary cinema. I think these are the very important three models in which Indian cinema mimicked Indian national movement or Indian freedom movement. And I think we can also make another category, that is in the form of post-independence freedom movement narratives. That is too can be categorized up to even the films like very virtual films on freedom fighters like Legend of Bhagat Singh and other films. Even some of the very important neo-Gandhian, kind of films like Munnabai MBBS and other things. Even we can extend and stretch that particular kind of phenomena. The extension and mimicking of freedom movement and its aspiration can be stretched into this particular time and period. Even some of the very important independent filmmakers or art house filmmaking and their efforts. Like, for example, in 1950s, we have came across some of the very important narratives, filmic, visual, narratives, done by M.S. Satyu, a very famous film, Garam Hawa. It is about partition and partition trauma. And again, another very important, series, TV series curated by Govind Nilani, that is known as Tamas. It is based on very famous Hindi novelist this Bhishma Sahani's novel Tamas. And apart from that, I can also contextualize, some of the very prominent works done by a Bengali filmmaker known as Ritwik Ghatak. Ritwik Ghatak made lot of films. I think he made 10 to 15 films. Most of the films, or lion's share of his films, are dealt with the partition trauma. For example, Ghatak himself is a victim of partition. Basically, is from East Bangladesh, and after partition, he came to Kolkata, and he has seen empirically the pain and agony and trauma of the partition people, the idea of partition. So he witnessed it and depicted that particular trauma in his films, especially films like Megha Dakatara, films like Subarnareka, films like Tidash Ikti Nadir Dam. These are the films made by Ritwik Ghatak, a very famous Bengali filmmaker. He is very phenomenal in depicting and having partition narrative, partition trauma as narrative, and his priority. So I think one of the finest filmmaker, he depicts what is exactly happened in the occasion of partition. I think these are the very important films and modules we can cite. Okay. And third very important thing, and even there are many more films also, but I don't want to list out all those films. And third very important argument I want to make, how theoretically and philosophically contemporary Indian cinema. So again, there is a huge issue and problem in invoking a pan-Indian cinema. Now, after Kantara, people are started to, after the failure of, the so-called, derogatory Bollywood, now people are talking about this, idea of pan-Indian cinema. And one or in another way, they are, they're expressing their antagonism against South Indian films like KGF, RRR, and other films. They are, they're doing very good in box office. Okay, and they're saying South India is now the epicenter and core of pan India. Earlier there was Hollywood; it was totally hegemonized. The idea of Indian cinema, and for your information, we are hailing, and everybody hails that, praises that, Bollywood. Even some years ago, American president came here, and he talked about Bollywood, the Amir Khan and the other Khans, and the starry kind of thing. But for your information, I think two people, very important people who have done, their work on Bollywood in India. One is Ashish Rajadhyaksha. He's in Bangalore, and I think one of the finest film scholars who worked on Indian cinema, especially on Bollywood. And another film scholar who is in America, known as Tejaswini Ganti. Fortunately, she's from Karnataka. They opine that the idea of Bollywood is out of 1990s contemporary dalal market, share market, this mafia, black money, and underworld, down kind of antisocial elements. Okay, for example, the first and foremost film Satya, that is with the project of this great Bollywood, derogatory Bollywood, that is financed by a very famous diamond merchant of contemporary Gujarat, contemporary India, known as so very, very important, diamond. He's a financier and producer, financier of Satya, very famous, film which inaugurated the idea of Bollywood in India. Okay, after release of after 2 or 3 years, he has been arrested by the Indian police, and he has been interrogated, and he was put in bar. So it clearly tells us that this Bollywood's juxtaposition and its relative with relationship with these kind of things, rather a cultural, visual, visual traditions and practice which exists in India that is very close to cinema. So this Bollywood is again highly problematic. Yeah, but earlier Bollywood meant for a all India cinema, and the idea of Bollywood represented as Indian cinema. But even we have to notice here, we have to acknowledge here that even before the idea of Bollywood, Indian cinema received in global arena very well. Okay, on 1950 itself, Indian film actually began to gets its reception. For example, in 1950, you may know that Raj Kapoor was very much icon in Turkey, in Soviet Russia, including China. Okay, our great Mitunda was very much icon in Soviet Russia. Okay, Raj Kapoor is such a he was received in such a manner. Most of his film music has been restructured as folk songs in southern parts of Russia, Turkey. Even now, if you witness, if you go to southern part of Turkey, then people ask that you're from the land of Raj Kapoor. So this much, he was phenomenal. Even idea of Rajinikanth in Tokyo, it is not even before Bollywood. The idea of Rajini and the phenomenon of Rajini was very much prevalent and received in Japan and even London. Okay, and it is very strange. In 1980s, one high commissioner he had office in Chennai, Japanese high commissioner, Japanese ambassador. He had his office in Chennai. He started that Muthu released on 1980s. Muthu became such a phenomenal in Tokyo. It crashed box office in Tokyo. Okay, then there was huge interest from India and from Japan to India and to Japan. Okay, then he made a lot of students and lot of people used to come to Chennai to learn Bharatanatyam, to learn Tamil and many such martial arts and many such things. In one particular moment, the ambassador of Japan made a comment. See, we known as Japanese people and Chennai people, racially we are connected. For that extent, it went, even before the invocation of Bollywood, we had a very, very interesting reception, reciprocal reception of Indian cinema across global across the world. Okay, so I think this is much derogatory and it faded, and now everybody talking about this pan-Indian cinema, and now again it is accelerated because of Kantara. Okay, yeah. My third very important examination, is that in how Indian cinema responded. I was telling that there is no, single way of Indian cinema. There are multi ways of Indian cinema, and if we add every sort of regional expressions, filmic expressions, then emerges an idea, a phenomenon known as Indian cinema. Okay, as in earlier session, sir has put it very beautifully. I even remember one of the very famous statement of Romila Thapar. She says clearly, the regional history itself is national history. There is no national history at all, because national history is eventually imagined. Okay, the idea of political India also, even before 1947, there was no political India. There may be little in a cultural and philosophical connection. That's a different issue. But as far as political India is concerned, and the idea of nation itself is colonial, came through colonial modernity. The colonial masters brought along with modernity, education and other things. So that's why how the various forms, regional forms, linguistic forms of film in India responded to the contemporary idea of nation and national movement. That is my very important query. I think as far as the reception of nation and nationalism and national movement is concerned, I think everybody reciprocally gave their consent. For example, the Hindi cinema held nationalism in a stronger way. I think they were the very important, carriers of national spirit and national cinema. I don't think they have set an alternative nationalism towards the, towards the contemporary nation and nationalism, which is set by the movement and even which is set after the spirit of agitation, even the organization like Congress and other things. But as far as the southern India is concerned, it is totally different actually. We have two sets. One set, again, the south set along with Kannada set, set and sect. It can be also termed as sect. It gave consent to the so-called contemporary pan-India movement. For example, Kannada, the idea of Kannada nationalism, that is expressed to Kannada literary expressions, including Kannada cinematic expressions. They gave assent without having any sort of discontent. That is a one very important model. That's why we are very familiar with, every morning we used to say, Jai Bharata Janani Atanuja. So that's the Kuempu model, and that was only one model, and we don't have any sort of dissent through literary expressions or even dissent through cinematic expressions. Everybody, okay, mother, Bharat Mata is our ma, and Karnataka mother is your sister. This kind of negotiation, kind of democratic deliberation, one can say. Democratic deliberation. Okay, this negotiation has been happened, and there was no dissent. But as far as Tamil is concerned, I think we are very much aware of Tamil phenomena, that they stood for a. In Tamil also we can witness two forms. One form which is totally backed by the contemporary Dravidian movement. Okay, Periyar and the DMK movement and other movement and all. They have stood for a separate nation of their own, with featurizing distinct language, distinct culture, distinct race and everything. The so-called Dravidian state, Dravidian Rajya. Okay, so this was a one very interesting format, and apart from that, there was another format. Sometimes these two formats has confluence. For example, Shivaji Ganeshan was very much prominent in backing this Dravida state, Dravida nation. While there was call for an attending pan-Indian contemporary nation, Shivaji Ganeshan addressed pan-Indian national nation call, and he gave consent. He also enacted in lot of films, and those films and structures, narrative, that is very close to the idea and aspiration of contemporary pan-Indian politics. That stands for the larger India, larger Bharat, pan-India. Okay, apart from, for example, his Shivaji Ganeshan's films like he acted as a freedom fighter, a patriotic person in 2 or 3 films, which exactly examples this idea of standing for a all India nation, that is Indian nationalism in one way. In another way, I also cited that Tamil or Dravida, so-called Dravida Tamil identity, coined and invoked a separate regional, that is to very much particular kind of a Dravida kind of nation. So as far as India is Karnataka is concerned, we cannot find that kind of thing. So we had only two polarity. One pole is all India or pan-Indian nation and nationalism. The other pole is, that is regional pole, that is a regional nationalism or Kannada nationalism, and it melted very beautifully. There was no clash, there was no contestations. Okay, that's why I think as far as Indian Kannada nation and nationalism and freedom movement is concerned, one of the finest scholar who worked on Kannada cinema, Mr. M.K. Raghavendra, he calls that in Karnataka context, the idea and existence of nation and nationalism on 1930 and 40 is a kind of negotiation between bipolarity. He calls it as bipolar identity and managing bipolar identity, and that kind of management is beautifully managed. There was no contestations and there was no tussle. But as far as Tamil is concerned, we can witness two streams. One is with all India nation and another one is this is against all India nation. Another very important format that can be witnessed in South India, that is by Telugu films. I can cite lot of, but I think only people are not that much aware of this phenomena. Even greater than Tamil films, Telugu films contest the contemporary pan-Indian nation, all India nation. For example, I can cite a very interesting film by L.B. Prasad, one of the pioneer and master who has done film and filmmaking in India. Also, he has started a film institute known as L.B. Prasad Academy. Still, it's running. I think one of the finest film school in South India. Okay, he made a film known as Manadesam. Manadesam theoretically, politically, confronts the idea of pan-Indian nation very brutally, not simply, not simple rejection, but very much staunch political position, taken by this Manadesam, and clearly says Telugu nation, Telugu desham, Manadesham, sorry, Manadesham, my desham, Mana means my country, my country is Telugu country, it is greater than Indian country. So these kind of contestations, theoretical political contestations and rejection can be seen, especially in the context of Telugu cinema. So that's why now it is highly difficult to homogenize and theorize that every sort of regional filmic expressions, cinematic expressions, they have collaborated into the very interesting greater integral project known as national project. Rather, some of the models, some of the formats also they have rejected and contested the so-called pan-Indian project known as Indian cinema, all Indian cinema, in all Indian nationalism, along with all Indian nationalism. So these are the this is a very important issue. This is a very important thing. The fifth very important issue, contextually I can put to the I can propagate my idea on Kannada nationalism, because it's my special interest. I have also done my PhD in Kannada cinema and Kannada nationalism and other issues. Kannada nationalism is concerned, we can call and we are with Indian nation, but the idea and imagination of Kannada land, which is expressed through Kannada cinema, is limited again. So that's why lot of scholars, including M.K. Raghavendra, makes a valid point. Even I also endorse that particular point, that the earliest film, even before even Kantara, even before the boys who are from coastal part of Karnataka, they came into film industry and filmmaking in Karnataka. I think some 10 years ago, up to 10 years ago, the idea of the heart and soul of and the core philosophy and core material of Kannada cinema lies in Mysuru region. So that's why M.K. Raghavendra makes a very valid point. Kannada cinema is not Kannada cinema, it's Mysore cinema, Hale Mysore cinema, old Mysore cinema. Because if you see any Kannada film, normally you see the materialistic resemblance of old Mysuru, like majorly from Mandya Mysuru geographical area. For example, in most of the films you see the physiology of Mandya Mysuru, old Mysuru, Gram Panchayati of old Mysuru. Every cinema you get the reference of mudde, ragi ball. Okay, but we have boiled rice that is from coastal part of Karnataka. Some cuisine which is made in Kolar and Gauribidnur part of Karnataka, and lot of varieties, very much varieties of cuisine, apparels, cultural practices and traditions that can be found in northern part of Karnataka. Not even single time, the northern part of Karnataka is considered as part of Karnataka. That's why I clearly made a point, even I endorse M.K. Raghavendra's statement that so-called in Kannada cinema up to 2010, that it is merely old Mysore cinema, rather the integral Karnataka cinema. Okay, for them This is one. Apart from that, if you look into their idioms, the cinematic idioms that comes through verbal and that comes through image, then the rest of the place and geography, apart from that old Mysuru, Mandya Mysuru, maybe Kolar, Gauribidnur and this area, maybe coastal part of Karnataka, maybe northern part of Karnataka has seen as derogatory and hegemonic. For example, in most of the films, the South Kannada Mani, waiter, is seen as Mani. That is to with very much, little weightage and little, existence. Okay, if you make a hierarchy, cinematic hierarchy of Kannada cinema, most of the Kannada cinema, popular Kannada cinema, placed him in the bottom. In a way, they have otherized North Karnataka, they have otherized coastal part of Karnataka, they have otherized the other parts of Karnataka. They have made their core or essence, that is old Mysore area. Okay, the idea of nation, so it is strictly against the idea of inclusive nation. It may be regional nation, but it is against the idea of and the spirit of democratic nation. A larger democracy always stands for inclusiveness. Every sort of strata, class, culture, practice, and everything. Now, that is the idea of a nation. Eventually, but if you look very much seriously into Kannada cinema up to 2000-2010, it is hegemonic. It never treats the other parts of old Mysuru as the part of integral Karnataka. Hegemonic, hierarchy. Okay, so this is a limitation of Kannada nation again. This is a limitation of Kannada. Even historicals which made on 1950s and 60s. Okay, majorly they revolve around Mysuru word, and you always see reference for Mysuru things. Mysuru, it may be cuisine, Mysuru political tradition, Mysuru Maharaja. Now also people used to claim and attribute their obedience to Mysuru, and this kind of gestures through cinematic visuals clearly suggests of a exclusive national identity of Karnataka. That is very, very important. Now, I think you have not seen the reference of North Karnataka very much. For example, always you see and even apparels also. For example, lot of popular film. You see a very interesting this chaddi known as patapat chaddi. This is with line patapat chaddi. But not even single time you witness kache of North Karnataka. Even Vesti of this one coastal part of Karnataka. Okay, their language is targeted, their apparel is targeted, their culture is hierarchized. So this kind of treatment definitely can be seen in visuals that has been carried by the Kannada cinema. So this is strictly against the idea of Kannada nation. If you want to invoke and imagine a Kannada nation, I think that must be inclusive, that must be democratic, that must be secular too. Even the portrayal of in any nation, in any nation, according to constitution, everybody has the same stake, equity. Every community has the same stake. But if you see the Kannada cinema, just look into the portrayal of Muslims and Christians. They are always negated in their role actually. If there are some crimes, then Muslim roles has been. Like it happens in Hollywood and in this cinema also. So that's why it limitizes the idea of nation. That is my argument. Okay, if there is some lady who is much daring and everything, then Mona used to go. Some Christian lady name used to come, and they coin a role with the Christian flavor. That's what. So these are the tendencies. I think, these are the tendencies very much, limited, and they don't invoke, and they never invoke the whole integral idea of nation that can be called as Kannada Rashtra, Kannada nation, Kannada Nadu, the idea of Kannada Nadu. It's very much limited. Very much limited. So, through this, actually, I made a lot of preparations. Actually, I made list of films, which expressed, freedom movement. If I want to cite a one very interesting, film which exhibited and carried the aspirations of, patriotism and national movement, that is, that can be contextualized and started with the efforts of Dada Saheb Phalke. Phalke was hailed as the father of Indian cinema. He started his industry. Actually, he was a photographer basically. He went to London and studied film there. Then his master, Williamson, he was a very famous man who invented Williamson camera, the earliest camera in the world, in the film history. Williamson asked, he became very, master. Phalke become very, he got his skills, very rapidly. So then Williamson asked him that, why don't you practice and make films in London? Then Williamson, this Phalke told to this Williamson that, no, I want, you have, basically I am inspired by a film known as The Passion of Jesus Christ. No, I want to shoot my devotions, mythology. That's why I'm going back to, India. This statement seems very much normal, but it is not that much normal, because even his, biography, even his later statements on his filmmaking, he beautifully, commented that, he was inspired by Tilak's Swadeshi movement. Okay, even Tilak was very close to him. It is also said that in earliest Phalke's productions, Tilak managed to, have some context of producers of modern Mumbai actually. Okay, he used to manage some producers, and after using those producers, Phalke produced those films. He was very much, fond of contemporary politics. So he was very much familiar with Phalke, and almost his, films carried freedom and this kind of, spirit. Even I can cite 1921. There was a very interesting film known as Bhakta Vidur. Verbally, I was, while big in the beginning, I was told that verbally some films mimicked the contemporary nationalism. 1921, one film made known as Bhakta Vidur. In Bhakta Vidur, there is a scene. This Vidur, Bhakta Vidur is a mythological film actually. Vidur is something to do with mythology, Indian mythology, rather politics and socials as a genre. In which Bhakta Vidur used to wear Gandhi cap. Okay, and he used to wear khadi in apparel, and he used to appear in the scene actually. And this has been brought by the British censorship, and this has been chopped up, cleared up, cut. Okay, and there are a lot of instances. For example, V. Shantaram made a film on Shivaji, and Shantaram asked to be present in front of British censorship and asked to cut lot of scenes which hails Indian nationalism and contemporary politics. Okay, and there are a lot of films, which carried, the ideas and aspirations of contemporary freedom movement. If I make a list, it becomes very huge and long list. So I don't want to. Just I focused on, the philosophical considerations of considerations and the analogy between nationalism and Indian cinema. So through this, I stop, and if you have questions, though, I can try to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your illuminating speech. We will now have a discussion and interaction session with the speaker. I'd now like to call upon Ms. Amber and Ravichandra onto the dais to begin with the interaction session. So before that, we have a few questions from the online gathering.
Sir, my question is, you mentioned the representation of the regional characters. Whole entire Telangana created because of this representation in the Telugu cinemas. So similarly, like the whole concept of the cinema is the entertainment. Why to take the entertainment into our ideology? That's a basic question. My question, because cinema should be treated looked as an entertainment. Then we should not look at the characters or what, because everybody wants to enjoy the particular period, and we equate with the entertainment into our own ideology. Is it right way to understand?
The idea of ideology itself is discursively debated across academics and even in a very normal general understanding. For example, it's like again kind of school of thoughts. For example, the idea of ideology basically invoked through Marxian philosophy, but it basically invoked through Marx, but it never stops there. Later Gramsci enlarged it. There are a lot of people in 1940 and 1950 and 1980 again. Frankfurt School, majorly scholars like Jürgen Habermas and others, they go on and extensively enlarged and extended the idea of ideology. It's not a uniform phenomena. It's not a homogeneous academic phenomena also. So that's why there was huge differences also. For example, the idea of Gramscian hegemony, that itself is a real contestation with Marxian idea of ideology. So idea of ideology as an academic experience is not homogeneous and it is continuous. Still, there are a lot of people, they are contributing and they are taking forward this particular argument. This is one. And apart from that, as a general experience of ideology is concerned, I think it is not so. It is like again the understanding of politics. We used to say and opine and express our ideas about politics in a party active politics manner, but that is not so. Apart from that, this formal party politics, there are a lot of layers of politics lies in the society and human behavior. For example, idea of patriarchy that starts from kitchen, controlling women, spacing somebody, that is to in some very much lower space, hierarchization itself again also equals or equates the idea of I think hierarchy and I think idea of power, and idea of politics. So normally I strongly agree that the idea of politics starts from kitchen. There we subjugate our women, there we put our hierarchies. So that's why in a general understanding also, if we examine our day-to-day life also, we are very much certain that politics is not merely party politics or active politics, but there is passive politics, there is informal politics. That is too a kind of politics, a layer of politics. That's what my opinion is.
Thank you, sir. So we have two questions from the online gathering here. So the first question goes as, what's the difference and similarities between Pan India of present day and Greater India of ancient times?
Before that, sir wants to add something.
Sir, a cinema basically looked at cinema. Basically, it should be looked at only for entertainment purpose, right? Why it should be taken as a center
to bring in certain kind of a narrative. Why don't you look at cinema only for the entertainment? I think that was the question.
That's what I said. The idea of ideology never lies in it always never lies in passive, active, formal kind of thing. That's what. For example, for Indian cinema, we have a scholar known as Madhav Prasad. He's from Mysore. He taught nearly 30 years in Hyderabad, English and foreign language university. I think he has done a seminal work on Hindi cinema. His book is known as Ideology of Hindi Cinema. It is published through Oxford University Press. He examined majorly popular cinema. Okay, Samskara. It's a text written by your Anant Murthy and done by a socialist director known as Pattavi Ramrai. Okay, it may be ideological. But what is there in a popular cinema like Satya or some other cinema? So he says that, he makes a very interesting analogy that the consumption pattern and consumption psyche of a popular public, he calls, is an ideology. The whole structure, whole priority, popular format priority itself is an ideology, according to Madhav Prasad. In a way, I agree with his proposition.
It also involves the investment. Some good investment makes sense. He must be getting money.
Exactly.
So he has a typical popular ideology. People like it. For example, you mentioned about the Masonian representation. It's obviously it is required. Otherwise, in Northern Karnataka, we will not be doing that much money. We will not get that profit out of it. So automatically you will be concise yourself into the particular area where the movie will be more just.
Okay. But again, in popular cinema, as you said, you mentioned about capital. Capital itself is a very strong element of ideology. According to Marxists, capital is a phenomenal factor which constitutes as an ideology. So this is the reason, and Madhav makes a very interesting thing that he coins a very interesting term known as subsumption. Subsumption is nothing but relationship between film, production, audience, and market. This is a triangle or nexus between these three very important things. These three things works as a phenomenon known as subsumption. And subsumption, the consumption pattern and idea itself is an ideology. This is his.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So the question from the gathering is: what's the difference in similarities between Pan India of present day and the Greater India of ancient times?
Greater India, as in the morning, sir told, it's a nationalist historians praising construction that Indian culture is extended up to North Asia and even up to South Asia and even the larger part of Asia. That was his basic assumption. But the Pan India is concerned, it's totally again it's a construct. You don't have concrete evidence and empirical experience as Pan-India. After having some indicators, after having some factors and the reachability, Kantara is, viewed in Delhi also by a lot of people. So maybe kind of reachability, the All India reach makes us to have an idea known as Pan-Indian, and the idea of Greater India is totally different. It's merely a philosophical construct, rather a kind of real empirical experience. That's what I can say.
Yes, sir. The second question is: so how far has movies like Jai Bhim and Asuran have reflected Ambedkarism?
Yeah, Jai Bhim and Asuran, including lot of other movies. It may be Pebbles, it may be, I can cite some more examples, Pebbles and another very, very important film, known as Pig Senthuman by a Tamil director, his debut cinema. It is available in Sony Live, known as Tamil. Okay, it is based on the short story of Perumal Murugan. Again, it's a Dalit narrative, very interesting narrative, and there are many narratives. Really, they have served because the filmmakers, directors, and the whole team, that is not like Kannada team. And actually, I can cite an example, very interesting example. In 2017, I was part of a curation of a festival that happens in Mangalore, known as Nitta University, Nitta Film Festival. Then I asked a Tamil director known as Lenin Bharati. I think he has done a very interesting film, only one film so far. He's doing his second film now. His first film known as Merku Todarchi Malai. Merku Todarchi Malai. It's in Amazon, so it's in Netflix. It's a very interesting film. This is a plight of a Dalit plantation worker aspiring a small piece of land, at least in his life. Okay, I have asked, actually Lenin fortunately came to Mangalore Festival, and I have asked Lenin Bharati, Lenin, do you have, reception for this kind of film? Then he said, yes, exactly. It may be microscopic minority, but we have. Because otherwise, they cannot make such movies. Not like Kannada. Even we praise and hail lot of stars, our stars in Karnataka, but they have not even produced a good, very good ideological structural film, which having a very interesting cause. Okay, Vetrimaran and lot of other filmmakers, even this Tamil also. Even Lenin Bharati film Merku Todarchi Malai is produced by very famous Tamil actor Vijay Sethupathi. Can you give one example in Kannada? It is. I think it is highly ideological ridden. They have something to do with ideology, some cause, and some thought, and that drives them to make this kind of film.
But many awards are given to Kannada movies. The best awards, national awards.
Yeah.
Like Bara, Tabarunikatte.
There was a heyday. Yeah, there was a heyday. Exactly. I strongly agree with Aruni sir that was a heyday. But this kind of, the idea of Dalit cinema in India, that only happens with the phenomenon of Tamil cinema, especially Vetrimaran, Vijay Sethupathi, even Jai Bhim producer and Jai Bhim director, and Mari Selvaraj, and many such phenomena and directors. They are Paranjit. Very prominent filmmaker is Paranjit. They are highly ideology-ridden, bounded, committed filmmakers. Rather, we don't have no one in Karnataka.
There is a parallel to Choma, right?
In
literature, there is a parallel.
Yeah, maybe that used to very early days of Kannada film that has been experimented. But this kind of the Ambedkarite spirit, again that is not written by a Dalit scholar, not directed by a Dalit director. Okay, and that cannot be seen as the part of very serious engagement with the contemporary Ambedkarite movement. If you cite, I think the idea of Ambedkar as an identity into movement and writing and philosophy and politics only emerged after 1990s. Okay, Valerian Rodriguez makes a very interesting point to this thing in his essential of writings of Dr. Ambedkar. So only the idea of Ambedkar phenomena, Ambedkarite phenomena, Ambedkarite discourse, philosophy, and Ambedkar and Dalit filmmaking emerged only after 1990 and 2010. So that kind of example cannot be seen, and I think in Karnataka.
I have one small doubt I may consider. First of all, I congratulate Mr. Pradeep for bringing you people and making this session so interesting and very meaningful. The major thing is, nowadays I'm very happy that the Kannada film industry was setting a example to the other, cinema industries of the world. One cinema which is very recently, which is becoming, making a very big news in everywhere, that is Kantara. You also spoke about that. And whenever the cinema becomes so like a blockbuster, whatever the words that we use, with that there will be some, what we can say, some politics or something. And there are some issues which is connected to this Kantara also. Some social activists and the people who are very deeper in research of regarding the history of India, history of Indian system and all, they come up with some, argument, the traditions which are used are portrayed in the Kantara cinema, which is not belongs to the Hindu culture, and they said that it is more ancient than the Hindu culture or cult when it came to India, or it is more it is belongs to the folk kind of cultures where they are using it. As a common man, I will have doubt whether it is correct or not. Well, because the people who are raising that point also has some knowledge on that. They also did some research and all. They also studied very well and all. So whom we have to follow, whether this is correct or this one is correct. As a researcher, please enlighten us about that.
I think this kind of, okay. Yeah. Now something, which creates kind of debate in society that should be welcome. Okay, and there is no ultimate truth in a classical sense, in a philosophical sense, in an epistemological sense, or even in a general understanding of world. There is no final truth actually. That is one point, and whichever and generates an agreement, generates a debate in the society, that is very important, and that kind of debate is needed. The very unfortunate thing in this time is, every kind of democratic discursive debate, dialectical debate, that has been suppressed. If you write, you are stopped. If you're writing something, some cartoon, you are stopped. So Perumal Murugan, he quit writing. Lot of cartoonists in India, they have quit cartooning. The democracy is exactly, I can trace it, it's a state against state. It may be a physical state, or even it may be a gesture or an attitude by a common man into a formal system. So that is first thing. And second very important thing I can cite, I also belongs to that particular region. There is huge, mismatch between the, visual portrayal of Kantara and the reality which exists in that particular region. Okay. Fortunately, they have subtagged it as divine and legend. For that, they have excuse. But the post-release expressions of that director and even the team really makes us to irksome actually sometimes. Because he told that, I have, renounced 30 days or 40 days non-vegetarian to perform this particular thing. And his political statements regarding cinema and about cinema and not related to cinema makes a clear understanding of his inclination too. So that's why, and that is exactly the same, and there is no relation. And the other unfortunate thing is, we have some questions, and a lot of activists raised their voices against the film and narrative structure and even the content. But the same thing is happening in coastal Karnataka. It is totally polarized, totally painted with the same color. The original black color, blue color, and many such diverse shades of color has been suppressed. That is again shown in cinema. I think there is no such thing committed by the cinema, but virtually, physically, it's happening. Earlier, actually, my worship pattern is Bhuta Kola again, Daiva. We don't believe in Devata system, and Daiva system never has a place in Agamas. Okay, these Bhuta Kolas and which whatever you see in Kantara, the Agamas again Brahmanic. They never entertain us, and we are not placed in Agamas. Okay, but yeah, and apart from that, the then practice, when I was a kid actually, then we used to have our ghost worship places, Bhuta Radhane places, and anybody, anytime, go and offer his offerings. Even I can actually, lot of our Bhuta Radhana centers without having any doors. Anybody can enter, go, offer worship and come. Annually once there used to be a festival kind of gathering. This was the phenomenon. But when coastal part of Karnataka along with India opened to globalization and second phase of globalization market and the huge dense migration into Mumbai and Dubai, people came back with lot of money. That is to money with illegal thing. Lot of shattis, the same shattis, okay, having lot of ladies bars. Such a misogynistic it is, horrible. Do you know what is ladies bar actually? Ladies bar is the place in which, along with bar, who are servers used to be the Bangladeshi girls or even North Indian girls used to serve the, liquors and other things. Sometimes customers used to, spread their money and lot of money and all. If they want to have physical intercourse, then they can pick any girl. Above the bar, there used to be 3-4 stairs and there used to be lot of rooms. Okay, if one girl, Mujra, Bangladeshi girl, takes 1,000, then 700 to 800 rupees goes to the bar owner, that is Shetty. Only 200 rupees for this lady. This is the idea of, ladies bar. People with lot of legal, a lot of ethical ambiguity, after having lot of such things, came to this place. They have given lot of money. They have, Jirnodhara, what is renovation. They have renovated temple in these Bhuta Radhana centers into temples. They brought Brahmins. No, Brahmins put a taboo. Brahmins became priests. Earlier anybody can go. Now they have also put a tariff list. These are the pujas, and they have also laid lot of restrictions. Now we also, if you want to enter, we also remove our banians and shirts. This kind of nonsense has been created, and this has larger links with migration economy, globalization, the ethical ambiguity of the entrepreneur, Shetty entrepreneur, Bilava entrepreneur. You don't imagine, there are a lot of Vedic Gurukuls has been established in the name of Narayan Guru. This is terrible. Throughout life, he fought against this casteist hegemonic hierarchy, Brahmanic hierarchy. In his name, lot of Billava associations basically belongs to Ilava, and the same caste can be found as in Billava. They established these things. This is what happening in Karnataka, this coastal part of Karnataka, and along with communal otherization. One way they are otherizing Hindus, Hindutva and other things in the name of a political label. In the same time, they are also othering Muslims. From last 2 to 3 years, they are banishing Muslim traders from the Hindu car festivals. They are not allowing to keep their shops there. So the whole analogy of coastal Karnataka politics and human existence is very much problematic. That is definitely. So every Bhutaradhana worships become Utsavas now. Kola Utsava. We used to Kola earlier, we used to have Kola. Now become Kola Utsavas. Brahmins, their interventions, their command, they used to monitor. So this is I think Kantara is a historical text which exhibits these dynamics and dynamism of contemporary society and polity of contemporary coastal part of Karnataka. Sorry.
So you can kindly take this up.
I'm extremely sorry.
We will now begin with the discussion session. Kindly start.
Okay, I'm extremely sorry.
A very good afternoon to everyone present over here. First, I feel obligated to declare my gratitude towards our teachers and our dignitary here for giving us time to interact with you. Before we begin the interaction, I would very much like to declare that we don't have much time on our hands, and therefore we have to cut the interaction very short. And quite frankly, our dignitaries and audience has rendered us quite questionless. So, my name is Amber.
This is Ravi Chandra sir. So I think you have answered almost all our questions. But still, when we go for the second topic, that is national movement, sir. So we all know that 1857 is the first revolt of independence. But we had also, before that, in 1806, the Sepoy Mutiny in Tamil Nadu. So there are so many revolts before 1857. So why we are saying only 1857 revolt which held in North India?
This can be termed very easily as historiographical. Yeah, this can be termed very easily as historiographical errors or errors of history writing in a way, or it may be called also. It may be also can be called or termed as hegemony of a particular school. For example, even before 1857, it is held that first. It is held that in one version, it's not a final version. It is done said by Savarkar, first Indian independence. But first Indian independence, never touched any tip and corner of South India. Okay, that is one. Although it held as national. And apart from that, in 1857, there was a nation called India. It is a political nation which is coined only in 1947. There may be a lot of cultural references. For example, we have in Kannada, Ganga Snana and Tungapana. It may be some sort of cultural reference and link to the whole India, but as far as political India is concerned, there was no India, and highly it is not possible. Apart from that, while there were struggles like this Sipai Mutiny and first Indian independence, even before around 1820, 1830, 1840, there were a lot of movements, tribal movements, Adivasi movements happened, including Vellore Mutiny. It is said that Vellore Mutiny was the first and foremost mutiny, but it is not recorded.
There is a book in English written by K. Rajan, South Indian Rebellion. The rebellions which happened during 1800 itself. Lots of rebellions during the 1800, and he records quite graphically how these revolts against the then hegemony. So he calls those movements, those revolts as the first war of Indian independence. So he has recorded that in the book itself. But because it's Savarkar, Veer Savarkar, who said 1857 is the first war of Indian independence, it has gained the political momentum. But otherwise, on record, you have K. Rajan to have recorded that 1800 revolts as the first war of Indian independence. Thank you.
I think, when India got independence, the history writing project has been started by Nehru. Again, that is through ICHR. There is even partially through NCRT, but basically through ICHR, as an institution, has been carved up by Nehru. I think, little hegemonic, little north-centric, definitely. because of non-representation of these incidents and evidences.
Thank you, sir. Sir, my question to you is, when essentially we talk of nationalism, we talk about fraternity and brotherhood as well. When these words are very synonymous in nature. So when in the contemporary nationalism, we saw nationalistic movements or movies, nowadays when we see the same movies, they are not as much promoting nationalistic values as well as polarizing the people of the country. So are we saying that nationalism somewhere along the way has deviated from its actual aim of uniting people and it's actually polarizing them now?
If I want to define nationalism, then I define my nationalism as inclusive, secular and democratic. If some nationalism or if any nationalism does not qualifies it, I think personally it is not nationalism at all. So India is for everybody. It's the constitutional aspirations too. So I think if somebody argues on behalf of exclusive nationalism, again it is against the spirit of Indian Constitution. So these are all you can quote a lot of such nationalistic movies. Only came after 2014. Okay. Only came after 2014. Even before there was no such mushrooming nationalistic projects and films. Where were they? It is very clearly thinking that there are people, there are popular public, they are communalized, they are consumed. Now, after thinking and knowing very much consciously, these narratives are changing. I don't want to name because Praveen. Okay.
Market economy, why define the concept of nationalism?
Yeah.
Market economy, redefine the concept of nationalism.
That's why one guy made a film on Kashmir. I don't want to name. Okay. I watch lot of films. Okay, I like propaganda films. Okay, if somebody very much honest to the propaganda film and film language, really I like it. I revel in it. Either way, it is not, honestly committed to the film language. In 1930, there was a filmmaker from Germany known as Leni Riefenstahl, made lot of propaganda films. She is known as, the mother of propaganda films. She made lot of films on Hitler. Whatever footage we see, it is because of Leni Riefenstahl. Some 5 years ago, she died. Even 1932 Berlin Olympics, she shot actually meticulously after using lots of cameras. She shot. She is projecting fascism, although I like her because she is honest to the medium. She is honest to the medium and she is not much diluted the historical facts. So in that movie, Indian movie, it is said that 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people are died. But if you go into official record, it is just 290. Okay, if the death of a single man or in 1,000, that is same, definitely same. But dilution of information also very much dangerous. It is against constitution because it eventually otherizes the community in India, polarizes the community in India. It feels venom in the community. So that's why this is problematic.
Sir, we talk about propaganda movies and we talked about your definition of nationalism in general. We have seen a lot of upsurge of nationalistic movies in the past 2-3 years. So are we saying that Indian cinema has failed the propagation of nationalism? Sir, we talk about nationalism and nationalistic values, and you said that you don't support the current nationalistic views of Indian cinema on movies. We've seen a lot of nationalistic movies come out in the past 2-3 years. What are you are you suggesting that we have the Indian cinema is not propagating nationalism nicely? And if not, then what is propagating it?
That's what I said. No, if I want to define, then my nationalism and my nationalism even through cinema, that must be inclusive, democratic, and secular. And everybody has equity in India. That is my position. Everybody, without border, barrier, geography, language, and everything, all are Indians, and everybody has equity. Hailing as India and Indians. That is my.
Sir, For a movie, a budget is very important. Then when in the present situation, the real youth need commercial movies. So when we combine commercial movies and the nationalistic movies, sir, are we not then distorting the real nationalist movements? What happened? Sir, what is your opinion? Are we really distorting the nationalist movements, or is it a right way what is happening now?
Again, it is like judging and thinking, about the truth. There is no final truth, and the idea of cinema itself is, even a realist cinema cannot present and represent reality. Because in cinema is a medium of visual language with particular time. You have some priority. You shoot lot of things, lot of footage. You cut, you edit, you chop it up. Okay, you add something, you get it back. So this kind of putting priority itself is something political, and it is monitored. Okay, it cannot be. Even if, as you said, nationalist, these very, nationalist films, the films with the nationalism and all, there is no final truth actually. It's kind of version. That's what I think.
Whether it's in history or in
Film, anything. Ultimate reality, ultimate truth, it is not possible, because even in documentary, some people used to say, if you put a camera, if you shoot real thing, it becomes documentary. The first and foremost documentary in human history, that is by Robert Flaherty, known as Nanook of the North. It's about the Canada based tribal people used in that particular icy area. Now this is the 100th year of Nanook of the North. A lot of criticism and studies are coming up. They are saying the whole project is monitored, staged. If you stage something, it's not that much documentary. There is something behind. You're meeting some demands, some objectives, like history and history writing. Historians and schools have some urgency, some objectives. Same way, I think filmmakers, and that film is not final.
I would add only one sentence, that ultimately, whether it's in history or through movie, it's whether through history or through movie or any other mode. The basic purpose is not to find out the truth. The basic purpose is to decode a process, decode the phenomena. You want to understand some problem, the problem of, say, for example, gender, the problem of a caste issue. You are trying to understand the entire issue, the process, how things have unfolded themselves. It is not just to find out the truth. Even in history, it is not to find out the truth. It is to understand how things have happened in the past.
That's why one of the Russian master, Andrei Tarkovsky, I think very famous filmmaker, he makes a definition on film actually. He says, a film watched by 1,000 people, that is the real meaning of film. That's one. Even book, even an incident, even idea of history.
Sir, I think you have sufficiently answered our questions. We would just like to ask you one last question.
See, first of all, I would like to know, is there really a pan-Indian cinema that we have been talking about? Because when we talk about even the hierarchy, that it was the hegemony of Bollywood over any other kind of cinema in India. So don't you think that it is rather a wider reach of the particular language? Because if we say the Hindi language, which is a dominant phenomenon in North India, could be seen in the larger region, which is catering to that language is catering to the larger region. So it could in that way be a regional cinema. When you talk about especially the Kannada cinema, and you talk about that, it is a certain Mysuru region which is dominating it. Don't you think, because from here emerged my second question, because when we talk about the language like Hindi, was there any language or particular dialect in southern Mysuru which could be the dominant, say, the fact That's why that it was getting to that region only. So was there something like that or not? Or if we say that, when we talk about hegemony, if it is a Bollywood hegemony, then it is a southern Mysuru hegemony in Kannada cinema. And if we look into the larger perspective, there is more cinemas like Maharashtra cinema, there's a Bhojpuri cinema, there's a Bengali cinema. We don't find any representation of this particular kind of cinema. Second thing that I would like to focus here, when we talk about the ideology, especially in the cinema, it's not purely the ideology. I believe it is the intermingling of ideology. And the one point that seems to be missing here in the entire discussion is cinema is majorly the representation of the society. To I would seek my apology that I have a lack of Kannada cinema knowledge about lack of knowledge about the Kannada cinema. But when I talk about the Bollywood per se, you would see that after independence, in 1450, it is a dominance of the partition and the sorrow that followed. And that India was largely economically the agricultural India. So representation of the farmers, who was actually the main leading character, and also it was the village moneylender whose exploitative tactics were majorly representative. Later on, when we see it was a Nehru socialist era, and they were projecting the industrialization, even in the 5-year plan so-called. So that time, for example, the movies like Naya Daur, in which it was it was largely the industrialization and the trade union movement that could be seen forecasting. Another thing that later we moved in the 70s, it was something the Amitabh's image of angry young man, which portrays somehow that the people were sort of unemployment prevalent in the society, and it was the anguish of the youth that represented through that. When we come to 90s, it was rather the globalization which started entering into. We could see we had a lot of setup, a foreign setup in Indian movies, songs, and even movies itself were made in the abroad settings. And later on, we say that the cinema might have seen, the issue-based. Lately, the movies like Toilet and all that. So it could be issue-based cinema. Where she has mentioned that was there any representation, the third point I would put here, was there any representation of nationalism previously or not? We know the Manoj Kumar. He used to be called Bharat in many movies. And he was one of the representation of nationalism at that point of time. So we, I think, had appropriately represented that thing also there. The fourth thing I would like to mention here, when you mentioned about ICHR here, that how that project was launched by Nehru for writing NCRT. I would say, first of all, it was NCRT which was bringing out the history textbook. So, it is always, ICHR is always a medium through which history textbooks are brought out. So at that point of time, possibly it was, here I would say partly the ideology comes into play. The particular sort of history might be written. So what presently is happening, people are believing the rewriting is going on, and I think that maybe it is wrong or right, I will not go into that discussion, but sometimes it is healthy also to bring out different aspects which people feel that it could be lacking. So good and bad, I would not go into that depth of the debate, but I would say that it is always better, all the representation, all facets of the history should come to light. Thank you, and I would like your remarks on that.
Sir, 1 minute, Ali. Kindly complete it within 1 minute.
Yeah. You have raised 3 to 4 questions. Later on, so we can. But I think very valid observations you have made. As a fact, information, I have listed a lot of such things, but Praveen asked me to present only in 30 minutes. How it went up to almost that's what. And I thought to deliver only the basic philosophical traits of Indian nation, nationalism, national movement, and Indian cinema. So otherwise, definitely I could have done. Nearly it is 20-25 pages essay I have made, but due to this reason, I did not make an effort. That is, and yeah, I think the rest of the things we can discuss definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for addressing all our queries and making this session.
Question.
Who told? Very short.
When we talk about propaganda, we came across this word several times during your address. When we talk of propaganda, we are generally talking about political propaganda, right? So, are we saying that nationalism is now being overshadowed by propaganda in politics?
I think nationalism is not overshadowed, but a different, different aspect and dimension of nationalism, and that is an urgency that is in it. So in that way I can put it. It is also kind of nationalism. Okay, it is also kind of nationalism, but it's a different kind of mode of nationalism, which is an urgency for some people, somebody, some group, and that is in
Yes.
that nationalism, I opine, personally, if I dissect, that is not inclusive, secular, and democratic. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. You have been a very nice audience.
Thank you, sir, for addressing all our queries and making this session a very interesting and interactive one. I'd now like to call upon Ms. Rashmi, Assistant Professor of Law of Cayley Society's Law College, to deliver the presidential remarks. Ma'am, please.
I can clear the clapping sound before I start my talk. Anyways, it's mandatory to give me a remark about the session which we had rigorously from 12:30 till 4 o'clock. It's a run-through of almost 3 hours less. In fact, when I started with AshwtahaNarayana Professor's class, I was just thinking about the historiographical schools relating to your syllabus which you guys are studying right now. And listening to second session, I was like national movement and cinema. What else it can teach us? Because we have learned about national movement, we watch cinemas and we know what nation is. But now this second session is such a session so illuminating. I think we should have a conference on this because I stress this word because cinema is not just a motion picture. It is an expression of a personality who writes a script, who directs it. So, it is more influential among the mass. We believe what cinema tell us. It's more of giving more of information, which believe whatever cinema says is true. And further, our ideologies grow on that, and we become more stubborn and we pursue on that. I think, there has to be some sort of a censorship where historians are also included when a cinema, is talking about historical facts and figures. Or else we try to think whatever comes out in a movie is fact, that's history, that's culture. We start believing it. I think we should work on Cinematographic Act, where when we bring in, we try to protect the literary, facts of our ancient times, practices that Joe said, where we actually glorify what has to be glorified and not entertainment. Entertainment movies are different, documentary is different, cultural movies are different, national movement movies are different. I think I'll just talk to our principal, sir, conference committee, talk to more elaborate on this particular talk. Anyways, we're coming up with a conference and academic session. I think, sir, thank you so much for wonderful deliberations in both the sessions. It was really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd now like to call Ms. Ravichandran from 2nd BA LLB to deliver the vote of thanks.
At last, we are end of the session. So, good afternoon to one and all. I, Ravichandra, deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on these outstanding lectures. First and foremost, I thank our speaker, Dr. AshwtahaNarayana, who gave us a clear picture of historiographical schools, and Dr. Pradeep Kenchanur, who presented us about national movement and cinema. I call Praveen sir to give a token of love towards AshwtahaNarayana sir and Pradeep Kumar sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Next, we also thank Dr. S.K. Aruni, sir, who is a Deputy Director of ICHR Delhi, and also Dr. Nitin Kumar sir, who is also a Director of ICHR Delhi. I also call Praveen sir to give a token of love towards him. I would like to call Rashmi ma'am to deliver a token of love to us.
Sir, thank you so much for taking so much.
I also thank Dr. Rajesh SG sir, who is the editor of Itihasa Darpana, and also Sir Manjunath, and also Ma'am Shashwini. And I also express my heartfelt thanks to Principal Sir in his absence, Dr. J.M. Mallikarjunaya, IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Manoj Kumar Viharaman, and also Research Culture for Cultural Heritage Institution, always for supporting and encouraging us. I also thank my Heritage Club Coordinator and one of the member of RCCH institution, Mr. Praveen Kumar K, who worked hard to make this event a successful one. Last but not the least, I thank all my Heritage Club members and participants for your cooperation in making this event a resounding success. I also thank Rashmi ma'am for her remarkable words. And also, finally, I leave you with this quote: "We study history not to be clever in another time, but also to be wise always." I end up by saying this. Thank you, Honorable.